the Jill and Stacy Show.
Thank you for having me on, Jill. Thank you for having me on, Stacy. I really appreciate it. My name is TJ Roberts, and I'm running for state representative in Kentucky House District 66, which is by and large the northern half, along with the western parts of Boone County. So all of Burlington, all of Hebron, some of Union, some of Oak Brook, some of France, and all of Francisville, Rabbit Hash, that general area. So that's where my district is, and native of the area, largely focused on the Boone County First platform.
And inquiring minds want to know who your hairstylist is.
Yeah, my hairstylist is Lefty Bernard. You can go to Lefty's Barbershop. I am originally from here. I was largely brought up through the Northern Kentucky Tea Party movement. I was very fortunate to be raised by a God-fearing family that instilled conservative values in me, and also just they figured out the value of hard work, especially given like my grandparents, they are from the horse racing industry. My mother was a single mom, so she had two kids. She had to take on multiple jobs in order to make sure that my sister and I received the upbringing, the education that we needed, and really just led to me and my sister working at very young ages, including at the grandparents' horse farm. I've been working at places like Chipotle or Five Guys since I was 15 years old. But then I start getting involved politically, more on a volunteer basis. I mean, there's photos of me at really young ages for sign waves for Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, would go knock doors for various candidates for office. The first big one that I had was in 2016. I was a campus coordinator in Lexington for Rand Paul's 2016 reelection campaign. And that was one of my first direct confrontations with the more vile nature of politics. I was actually spit on the day after the 2016 election because I was wearing a Rand Paul shirt, and my extremely liberal university had him write me a 75-word letter of apology where T and J counted as one separate word because it stands for Theodore Joseph. And yeah, that was a bit of a wake-up call that we're not in this thing to just have a philosophical debate, and that we actually are in a fight for our existence. Throughout college, I'm involved with organizations like Young Americans for Liberty, Students for Life. I would do side work with the National Association for Gun Rights. I'd work for right to work projects throughout the country as well, work on various political campaigns. Some of my more notable ones were in 2018. I was on Savannah Maddox's race. 2020, I was in Felicia Rayburn's race. I would also travel the country in 2020, and we can talk about some other things that happened in 2020 before as well, working on campaigns such as Nancy Mace for Congress. Just that's one of the big ones through it. So I've been around quite a bit. 2020 was a huge one because that really showed that we're not just looking at a fight for conservative values. We're not fighting for us prevailing. We're fighting for our own existence. And that truly came to fruition whenever the governor banned church. And I was threatened with criminal prosecution for attending a church service on Easter Sunday. And fortunately, I was able to find an attorney, sue the governor, and beat the governor in federal court for that. And thank God we did, because that set the precedent that there is nothing under the sun that will ever triumph religious liberty in the United States. And that was crucial to us. The First Amendment is first for a reason. It's crucial. And I'll say I've been fighting for First Amendment rights for a long time, but mostly it was the free speech issue. But then we get into the religion issue where we're talking about matters of eternity. And this was a direct, outright infringement on it. It was a direct assault on it. Now, I'm used to assaults on constitutional rights happening. I just never thought that they would go and assault freedom of religion. I mean, we can see it where now I believe we're at 29 states are constitutional carry, but that means that there's still 21 states where you must ask the government for permission in order to carry a firearm to defend yourself. It's unconscionable to me that you have to ask the government for permission to exercise your fundamental rights. And we still see in Congress, we are debating whether or not there's a need for a warrant to spy on you through a FISA court. I thought that the Fourth Amendment was already decided in 1791. So, it's one of those issues where our civil liberties are fundamentally under attack. And I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to fight for those liberties. And I intend to take that fight to Frankfurt as well as your next state representative. My biggest points that I've been talking about in this has been school choice and parents' rights. That I think that is one of the most important issues that we can talk about, because at a foundational level, if you send your children to Rome, they're going to come home as Romans. It's our job to raise our children. It's not the government's job to raise your kids. And frankly, you don't want that to be the government's job. We can see what is happening in our schools right now, where children are being inundated with absolute woke, anti-fact nonsense. And then and the reality is, the best way to combat that is to make sure that a child has a strong family and a strong church to come home to after school, because that's where they can actually reconnect with reality. We're not going to be able to save ourselves from this overreaching government if we don't have a strong family and faith foundation that makes it to where large government isn't necessary. The second one is anti-corruption. In 2019, a report came out indicating Kentucky is the most corrupt state in the country. That hasn't changed since then, 5 years later. Particularly, I've been fighting for anti-corruption through transparency efforts, making sure that our Open Records Act remains intact and doesn't fall apart. The second big part, though, has been fighting to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, and that's probably the most important issue that I have worked on, other than the protection of direct constitutional amendments and the fight for the preborn. The reason why I view ending taxpayer-funded lobbying as so important is because for every single grassroots conservative issue, there's a taxpayer-funded lobbyist working against you. You have no choice but to pay them. You pay your income taxes, you pay your property taxes, you pay your sales taxes. Some of that money is going to lobbyists who have lobbied to continue lockdowns, lobbied to fight against school choice, lobbied against transparency efforts, lobbied against constitutional carry, lobbied against free speech protections for college students. In fact, university lobbyists in Kentucky, they don't even have to register as lobbyists. They are spending millions of your tax dollars to lobby for stuff that you would never support. I think it's such a common sense issue that you should not be forced to finance advocacy with which you disagree. I have worked in grassroots advocacy where I have mobilized the grassroots to contact their representatives to pass or defeat legislation on many cases. I have never accepted tax dollars to do that. The organizations that I have worked for, the National Right to Work Committee, the National Association for Gun Rights, they have had to accept donations from the grassroots who are willing to give. There is a consent issue, right? The Kentucky Association for Counties, they don't have that. They're paid by the tax dollars. The Kentucky School Boards Association, they are receiving your tax dollars, and then they are advocating against parental involvement in school boards. It makes no sense to me. It should be a priority bill, and I'm thankful for everyone who has co-sponsored that legislation. It's been a multi-year fight, and I look forward to continuing it. And then the third and final one is just taking the fight to Andy Beshear. Unfortunately, Beshear will be the governor for the next 4 years unless he breaks his pledge and decides to run for U.S. Senate in 2026, which I wouldn't put that beneath him. He's ambitious, he's power hungry, and there is nothing quite as powerful as a United States senator as the replacement of Senator McConnell. But the reality is, when I'm talking about Andy Beshear, I'm not just talking about Andy as the person. I'm also talking about his administrative state. We have an out of control administrative state where we have unelected bureaucrats who are not accountable to the public by way of election, who are making the laws despite not being elected legislators. They do it through administrative regulation, and it is something that is hardly published, hardly covered in the news, and it has to stop because it is a outright breach of our separation of powers. It is a breach of the consent of the governed. It's foundational to taking out corruption, that every single person who has the ability to bind you under force of law should be subject to electoral accountability. That's one of the things I intend to introduce is actually either one, if anything has lawmaking ability, they must either be an elected position themselves, or I will introduce a term limits matter for bureaucrats, where if you are staff in the executive branch, you can only serve for so many years. I think it's essential that we do that because the reality is there are people making lifelong careers about exerting control over the citizens of Kentucky without having any feedback from the electorate.
Tell us about your educational platform and how it differs from your opponents.
Sure, Jill. So I am a graduate of Boone County Public Schools. I went to Burlington Elementary School, Camp Earth Middle School, and Connor High School. I believe that it is a parent's right to guide the education of a child, and a child should not be bound to their educational destiny by their zip code. I'm a staunch advocate of school choice. I believe that any money that we are spending for education, which right now we're looking at somewhere between, depending on which county you're in, $16,000 to $20,000 per student. I think that that money should follow the student. It shouldn't go into the system where you wind up with bureaucracy, you wind up with bloat, you wind up with these issues where whenever you just keep funneling the money into the system directly, you don't have an incentive for better performance and more efficiency. If the money follows the student, however, now there's a market, and markets fundamentally bring better quality products at lower costs. And so I'm a staunch advocate of school choice. My opponent, fundamentally, every time he had the chance to vote for school choice issues, he voted against them. He's an opponent of school choice. That's part of why he lost in 2022. He's trying to claim that he'll follow the will of the people and whatever that means. But at bottom, when more than 80% of Kentuckians, including more than 2/3 of Democrats, by the way, were saying that they support the notion of school choice, my opponent voted against it. He didn't follow the people then. He's not going to follow the people now. So school choice is foundational to it. Second, parental involvement in our school board systems. We need more accountability. I mean, we can see just 2 counties over from us, there was a massive Open Meetings Act lawsuit in relation to parents being excluded from school boards for outright arbitrary and capricious reasons. So we have a system that is openly hostile to parental involvement. My goal is to flip that, whereas on the other hand, my opponent was the president of the Kentucky School Board Association and the National School Board Association, which, by the way, is the organization that asked the Biden administration to label parents as terrorists under the Patriot Act because they were showing up at school board meetings. There we go. Right. So at base, I believe that parents are freedom fighters, not terrorists. I believe parents are in charge of their children, not the government.
Tell us about this Better School Kentucky donation to your opponent. For how much money was that? $40,000?
Yeah, that was $40,000. So Better Schools Kentucky is the super PAC that the Jefferson County Teachers Association operates. So Jefferson County, let's face, largest school system in Kentucky. It is also the worst performing by several metrics, whether that be bureaucracy, bloat, poor management, basic student outcomes. More than 70% of students in Jefferson County Public Schools cannot read, cannot write, cannot do math at their grade level. They have an illiteracy rate that rivals third world countries. Rather than focus on that, though, they're more interested in lobbying to keep your kindergartner masked, to expose 5-year-olds to grotesque so-called sex ed, to oppose the bill to ban gender mutilation. and apparently now they've decided to spend some of that money as well in interfering in Northern Kentucky politics. Boone County Public Schools, it has its problems. No system is perfect, but my goodness, it is a much better system than the Jefferson County public school system. Much better by practically every metric. We're spending less per student and we're getting better student outcomes nonetheless, right? And the reality is people can say that it's a economics issue. I was raised quite poor by a single mother. I graduated summa cum laude in high school, magna cum laude in undergrad and law school. Economics is not your determining factor in your education. It really is your motivation, your parents' motivation, and the quality of teachers that you have. I was blessed to have incredible teachers throughout my school, throughout my education. So you're looking at a wildly expensive system where I don't think any parent would say they're getting their money's worth if they're being objective. So, but instead they've decided to play in my race, and largely it's because they know I'm going to be an advocate for outcomes for students to make sure that our students are career ready, that they understand the values of this nation, that they are not inundated with woke nonsense. They know I'm going to be a fighter on that issue. They know I'm going to be a fighter for school choice, where if you are a parent who lives in a school district with a failing school, you are able to pull your child and take them to a school that will better suit your child's needs, regardless of your financial status. They know I will fight for that reality in Kentucky. And they know my opponent will actively fight against everything I just said I will fight for.
What do you think about Boone County Republican Party censuring your opponent?
So I stayed neutral on that one. I recused myself from that vote. The reason I recused myself, obviously, is because there's a I have a vested interest in this. In my view, I am the Republican candidate for this district. I'm the only one who has never donated to Hillary Clinton. I'm the only one who has never donated to Rand Paul's Democrat opponent. I'm the only one who has not attacked Donald Trump's Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, because she believes in school choice. I'm the only one who's fundamentally running on the conservative platform that the Boone County Republican Party wants. I think that the Boone County Republican Party had every right to do what they did. I stand by my decision to recuse myself on that matter, as I've mentioned, that my opponent and I have many disagreements fundamentally about the direction that this party, this county, this Commonwealth, and this nation should head in. And I said that we were going to hear about those differences throughout the campaign trail, and we're hearing about them now.
Who all hasn't endorsed you so far?
My endorsements are actually rather far reaching. So far in the legislature, I have the endorsements of Steve Rawlings. He's the incumbent for this seat. He's now running for state senate. I've endorsed him for that race. Marion Proctor has endorsed as well. Mark Hart has endorsed. Savannah Maddox, Steve Doan, Felicia Rayburn, Jay Williams, Candy Massaroni, and Josh Calloway as well, a little bit beyond our area. I've received the support from several grassroots. The Garmin organizations endorsed me. Northern Kentucky Right to Life has endorsed me. The National Association for Gun Rights has endorsed as well. More high level, like higher up figures. Vivek Ramaswamy has endorsed me. Dr. Ron Paul has endorsed me, and Congressman Thomas Massie has endorsed as well. And I just recently announced the endorsement of Senator Colton Moore. Colton Moore is a Georgia state senator who, when he saw the flagrantly corrupt prosecution of Donald Trump in Georgia, he initiated a process to force an investigation and potential impeachment proceedings against Fani Willis. And I'm thankful to have his support. And the large part of it was that I was on the ground with him, fighting against the prosecution, fighting for the impeachment of Fani Willis. Further endorsements is former Florida State Representative Anthony Sabatini, who was one of the individuals who largely focused on impeaching and removing individuals in Florida who were locking us down. He's largely pushed Governor DeSantis to be the conservative DeSantis campaign that he would be. Pretty much every piece of conservative legislation that gets passed in Florida, Anthony Sabatini was the sponsor of it at some point. And now that he's no longer in office, another legislator picks it up and then they pass it. Which brings me to a point. It truly is amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit.
Do you have any events that are coming up anytime soon?
So an event that is coming up isn't necessarily an event that is for my campaign, but I will be at it on April 25th at Hebron Baptist Church. There is a town hall that Chet Hand and Steve Rawlings will be at to discuss issues affecting Hebron. I care about this issue because Hebron is right in my district. The entirety of it, except for a small sliver of Hebron, is in Representative Banta's district. Steve and Chet have invited me to attend. I'm absolutely going to be there because I want to hear what the people of Hebron care about. I want to hear their concerns. I want to make sure that I'm plugged in with this community. I'm going to be having some events coming up. Keep track of my social media on this. We're just finalizing some details on some stuff in terms of some future fundraisers, future get out the vote events. Nothing too major at the moment, but stay tuned for it.
How do people follow you?
So you can follow me on my Facebook by just looking up TJ Roberts. It's a headshot of me in a gray suit. Those are the two pages that are mine. One's my personal. You can feel free to send me a friend request, or the other one is just my campaign page. Now, if you want to follow me on a platform where I'm not shadow banned, you can go on to X, formerly Twitter. My handle on that is at real TJ Roberts. And you could also go to my campaign website. Those are the main ways to reach out to me. I've also included on my door literature and my campaign business card my personal phone number, 859-446-0185. I just want to be as responsive as humanly possible to you guys. And frankly, just giving out my number is the best way to do that. Best way to reach out through that is text message. I'm in court quite a lot because I do constitutional litigation. And as a result, I'm in court a lot more than even your average attorney because it's a lot of hearings, a lot of motion hours, a lot of fun stuff like that. So I miss calls a lot, but texting me is probably the best way to reach out to me through that phone number. Always keep up the fight here. The reality is that the Republican Party of the future is the Republican Party of America first. It's the Republican Party of constitutional conservative. It's the Republican Party that understands that we're in a fight for our very existence and should act accordingly. I fundamentally believe that the next generation will continue to carry those values. We're seeing as younger people get involved, myself included, we're seeing in Ohio with J.D. Vance and Bernie Moreno, who are relatively young compared to the average age of the U.S. Senate. They are hardcore America First, pro-liberty individuals. We can see the junior senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. He was rather young whenever he first got elected in 2010, right? Fighting for freedom. It really is that this next generation takes the vision of our founding fathers and they are putting them into action. And it's largely because the government's overplayed their hand in terms of the desire to control them and pour propaganda down their throats. They've had enough, so don't count us out. And I hope I can count on y'all's votes on May 21st.
Use your brain and do your research.